We see our mission here really as we want to take this technology and make it so that it can help you as the physician, as the clinician, get all of the stuff done so that you can focus your own mind and your own training and your own background on doing the best caregiving and diagnosing possible.
Welcome to the Future of Psychiatry podcast, where we explore novel technology and new innovations in mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Bassi, an addiction physician and biomedical engineer. Today, we are with Nathan Pereboom and Jackson Bierfeldt from JotPsych. Nate is the CEO and Jackson's the CTO, and they can tell you what those mean and what their roles are. JotPsych listens to your client interactions and generates complete HIPAA-friendly, medically accurate notes, which we'll talk about later, which is kind of astounding and like magic in my mind. It records your patient interaction on the web or on a mobile device, in person or via telehealth. And then you can review and edit the auto-generated note and the template that it goes into, and you can basically copy that into your EHR system. So welcome to both of you.
Bruce, we're going to pull you into our sales team. That was a good pitch.
Thank you so much. So documenting, in my mind, is one of those things that gets very little attention, but it's probably takes up a disproportionate amount of your time and energy and frustration. There's no class on documenting, and you just learn afterwards by trial and error and anecdotes and when things go wrong. Why do you feel that life is this way for us clinicians? Like, why is it so important, but yet we spend no time on it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And in order to understand how charting got to be the way it is, you actually have to go back 10, 15, 20 years to when the US government was getting really excited about electronic health records. And, at that time, the government was saying, hey, if you want to get reimbursement in full, we actually require that you be on an electronic health record. And so what happened was there was this explosion of software companies that were trying to make healthcare records that could be easily, interoperable. So records could be sent across health systems and across clinics, and also comply with all kinds of, both private and public payer mandates. And probably started out as a really good idea, morphed into this monster that, has in varying degrees complicated and benefited patient care. And so, it's one of those double-edged swords where on one hand, we've got a lot of great data from EHRs, but on the other hand, nearly every clinician we've ever spoken with misses the days of paper charts if they're old enough to remember those.
Yeah, isn't that kind of a weird thing?
No, I was just going to say, it's just one of these situations where, the burden disproportionately fell on clinicians to take on all of this extra documentation. And what was kind of promised as, oh, it's digital now, it's going to be easier, we're going to be able to, move things around more quickly. I think most of the people listening to this probably know that interoperability promise has definitely not come true. And what's really happened is the amount of charting that needs to be done for every single interaction has just ballooned in the last, several decades. So we have, people telling us that they see a full slate of patients every day, and they're trying in between those patients while they're like eating a sandwich to like type down some stuff. They're typing or writing down things while they're in the room with the patient or while they're on a call with the patient. And then still after all of that, they're going home and they're spending an hour or two after they've made dinner and are trying to spend time with their family, keeping up with their notes. And if they don't, then they're chronically behind. And, everybody in the field knows somebody who's chronically behind on their notes. And they know just like what an absolute, talk about a mental health issue, what a problem that can be for the clinicians as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going through my experience as a clinician in a large hospital system, I kept encountering these scenarios where there's a team or some sort of administrator who thinks it's a good idea to add this like new screen or this new element to the patient chart. And over the course of a few years, the note just like balloons up, gets even larger and larger with every passing year with a new type of thing that you have to include in your note. So I think one of the things that when people say they miss paper charts is that they can't be told like of these like new elements that they need to include in those paper charts, restricted to basically the core elements of what they think is clinically pertinent. But then insurance companies and quality improvement teams, they add these other parts to the note that are important to them. And as a result, the clinician needs to now make a note that has an audience of maybe 6 different teams, the insurance company, the biller, the quality improvement, the patient, et cetera, other clinicians that they might be speaking to on the other teams, perhaps. Do you have any data as to why this is such a big burden for clinicians and why you felt it was necessary to address?
Yeah, we think about this problem as the kind of eternal trade-off between structured and unstructured data. So if you think about a spectrum, all EHRs, all documentation systems, even outside the medical field, fall along one end being just like a blank Word document where you could just free flow information. And then the other being a really structured survey where you're clicking predefined preset data or putting numbers. And EHRs vary in their degree of structuredness. But a lot of the note bloat that you're talking about actually comes from a lot of administrations saying, hey, we want more structured data. And so you get these like really, really interesting evolutions where, there's an EHR out there, we won't say which one, that was actually like a golf course management software that then transitioned into medical software because setting up a tee time and like putting in all the metadata for like starting some time on a golf course was actually similar enough methodologically to the way that medical charting had become in order for that transition to make sense for them. And so one of the things that we find is magic about this point in history is that artificial intelligence now allows us to take unstructured data and turn it into structured data without involving a human being. That is like the key thing that AI, like if you had to say, like, what is the key thing that AI is allowing for? It's that. And I grew up in a medical family where I saw this burden. My dad's a neuro-oncologist, my mom's a nurse practitioner. They were doing a huge amount of medical charting when I was a kid, and it affected them and it affected our family. And when we started looking at kind of the available tools and also the impact that charting was having on even things like actually performance of medical care or, clinician burnout, it was a problem that we really felt called to tackle and called to address.
We should give the listeners some time to Google search golf course EHR system so they can figure that out.
It has a very obvious name. We don't think they changed the name in between.
There's going to be a spike now in traffic in that. Go ahead, Jackson.
No, I was just going to say, everyone listening to this knows that charting's a problem. And most people even say it is probably the biggest problem with regard to burnout. And this is across, all specialties in the medical field. Because when someone goes into medicine and patient care, they are not thinking, oh, I'm going to just be doing a lot of like clerical documentation work. You go in to actually have FaceTime with other real human beings that you want to give care to and you want to help. And then what ends up happening is that in order to do that, yes, there is a component that is actually medically relevant and is important to take down notes and make sure that you remember things and document that. But I think everyone has a sense that a lot of the stuff that's taken down is just kind of that bloat. It's necessary in some way, in some systemic way, but it takes away so much time that people are starting to wonder like, okay, is that minor benefit that comes from me filling out 15, 20 minutes of paperwork for every single half-hour session that I'm doing actually pushing the needle there? Or is it just making my life so crazy that it's then hard for me to like give care to people? And I always come back to the thing about, when I go to a doctor, even like a primary care physician, I do not like that I'm in the room with them and they are not looking at me. They're asking me questions, I'm talking to them, and they're just totally turned to the side and typing on the computer. And I understand why they have to do it. If they didn't do that, they'd never get their job done. But from the patient perspective, it's so frustrating because that care that you're looking for, both in terms of the medical care, but also the like emotional care that you're getting from a provider, that just feels like, it's not there sometimes. And that's one of the things that we're really proud about being able to bring back to the clinic room with our software.
Let me just put some numbers around that, because a lot of people, when they think about their relationship to charting, they worry that it's actually a personal problem, or they worry that it's a personal failing, or they worry that their perspective is unique. But just a few numbers to kind of frame this. So the thing that Jackson's talking about, which is patients don't like when you're on your computer during an encounter. They would prefer that you focus on them. About 25% of patients feel like they're not being heard when you're on your computer or you're jotting something down when you're in front of them. Physicians, about a third of them feel that they're doing just way too much charting, or they're charting just an absolutely excessive amount. And this is the statistic that gets me. 34% of all medication errors in malpractice suits are related to typos in an EHR. Let me just say that again. A third of all medication errors that get litigated or settled in a judicial way come from human error in EHRs. And I think that for us, what we believe is it's not just that people don't like it. It's not just that it's bad for patients. It's actually like not good because people are generally not great at writing down accurate information after 15 visits in a day. So there's just so many good reasons to fix this problem.
It's a huge problem. I think a lot of people can relate to this. In disclosure to the audience, I've given it a shot. I've tried JotPsych, and I think the way it works and picks up on even the small details, hopefully that can take me out of that 34%, if possible, down the road, knock on wood. It's like magic. It really does pick up on all of the details that were discussed in the session and puts it into an organized methodological fashion, depending on whatever type of template that you want it to be in. I think that's probably one of the challenges that you all had, and you can speak to this maybe, is when people think of charting, they don't think of it as a somewhat personal in the respect that they have their own style, they have their own structure that they're familiar with, that they've probably honed in on over the past 15 years or however long they were practicing. And they're wondering, how can a computer start to learn my style? What is the trade-off here going to be? Because yes, I agree with you that it's a huge time sink, but what would life be like with this AI system kind of incorporated? Can you give an audience member kind of a visual of what that would look like and why it would be helpful for them?
Yeah, I'll jump in here and say that when you think about the evolution of AI, and I'm going to start with, machine learning. This is kind of what we were calling this like same pattern of computation a couple years ago. The first thing that machine learning actually proved to be really good at, as far as like general mass consumer facing software was these recommendation engines. When you think about how YouTube changed from 2008, when it was just a place where you hosted videos, to 2016, when people would just load YouTube and be shown things that was relevant to them, that was a huge victory for machine learning. Because before, that curation process, that ability to kind of learn what you like and then deliver something to you, that was something that humans had to do. And you just couldn't do that for millions of YouTube users. Look at all the videos they watched and then pick out a couple and give it to them. That's what your friends did for a lot of years. That's what we do socially, but like machines weren't good at that until we kind of crossed this technical Rubicon into something where like the machine can take in all this data and then kind of filter it and figure out like, okay, this is what you want. And then that is really one of the big wins in AI now, and especially with these large language models, is that this is something that it's very good at. As Nate put out before, like taking unstructured data and turning it into structured data is a huge strength, but also taking in a whole bunch of little tiny preferences. Oh, I like it this way, I like it that way. And then being able to kind of like learn the patterns from that and apply those to just an individual practice or an individual provider. And that's something that we're really focused on with our software, is understanding that every single provider, regardless of their specialty, they have a certain way that they like to do their notes. And this is something people come to us and they say, it's great. I like the idea that I could have a medical scribe that's always in my pocket and always ready, just listening to me and generating these notes. But I like my notes the way I do them. I don't really want to just like have to adopt like whatever structure is coming down from on high. And we think of that as every provider having their own like personal fingerprint. And we try to build our software in such a way that it lets you take your fingerprint and get the notes to be generated in the way that you like it. Whether that's you want bullet pointed information, or you want a long free flowing narrative of information, or you only want just like the 3 most important things with just like quotes directly from what the patient said, or you want 16 paragraphs saying every single tiny thing that happened. Whatever your preference is there, we build the software to try to like hone in on that customization so that you can feel like, hey, this is like a human medical scribe. They're just way faster, way more accurate, and about 1/30th the cost. That's what we're trying to build. And that's like the most exciting thing as far as, our product goes technically, is that customization aspect.
Is that customization aspect technologically more easy or the less challenging piece to this? Or are there other challenges in this process of developing a good outcome for the clinician?
Yeah, I would say the customization is definitely one of the biggest technical hurdles. And it's something that, we're constantly making progress on. As we're recording this, we just released a new feature that allows people to build templates, a lot more carefully to the kind of sections that they want. Because we know that some people, they just really need like an HPI section. But some people, they need the HPI here, and then they need the topics discussed here, but then they want this here and that there. And we're giving the ability to kind of like Lego, like build those together. But the next thing that we're working on is this really exciting feature where you're going to be able to just talk to our software and say in kind of a vague way, like, this is the kind of note that I need, or I need a section that does this kind of thing. I don't really know like exactly how to like train it, but like you can have a conversation with our software, and our software will help you build your own little Lego blocks that then you can then use in the future to generate all of your notes.
In terms of uptake and adoption with this model, do you feel, is it the clinicians? What is the rate determining step here? What is the bottleneck in terms of why more people aren't adapting it now?
I love that question. We think about our whole business as a rate limiting function or a rate limited function. Right now, the biggest rate limit is just people who know and feel safe using AI. AI has a brand problem, which is that there is a portion of the population that they themselves feel a certain fear or trepidation about using AI tools, or they perceive that their patients might. Some of that has to do with privacy. Some of it has to do with just the black box that is AI. And so, I think the biggest thing that we're trying to do with folks is introduce them to the tool, have them use it for free, and walk them through in as rich detail as possible how we protect things like patient information, security, data, all of that. Once people start using the software, we can see this. Like if someone creates more than like 15 or 20 notes, at least in our software, they generally stay using it indefinitely. I mean, obviously we're a young company. We're not even a full year old, but we've had many, many users who tell us that this has changed their life and they continue to kind of increase their usage of the software over time. So awareness is, to answer your question pointedly, awareness is the problem.
And one of the things we often hear from our providers is that they themselves are sometimes shocked at how willing their patients are to have a recording going on. Because especially when we started working with behavioral health specialties, we thought, oh, there's no way that this specialty is going to, at a cultural level, be okay with like a recording device being in the room. And, sometimes it's not. There are certain patient populations where that's just a non-starter. But what we found is that that's maybe 2% of any of the behavioral health specialists that we've ever approached here. Because what patients realize is that you can say, all right, I'm using this thing on the table that, it doesn't send your name or any identifying information about you to anywhere. It's just writing this stuff down and then helping me do my charting so that I can sit here with my hands, folded and my eye contact on you and not have to be typing things or writing stuff down or otherwise distracted about getting through my notes. So, the way that people communicate that to their patients is, different in different ways. But like, we have been blown away by the amount of patient support that has existed around the software. Patients are just as excited about it as providers sometimes because they say, great, now you can focus on me and I don't have to worry about what you're typing over there.
If I can just make just a bit of startup lore here within the company. So when we started, we told ourselves, hey, we can go after any specialty in medicine, but not behavioral health. We're like actively not going to market to behavioral health folks. We're not going to do testing with them. There's just, the information's too sensitive. So, there was a point over this past summer where we had probably 50 people actively using the software for free. And we said to ourselves, okay, we need to start charging for this because we're spending a huge amount of our money on, servicing the software and maintaining the APIs. And, and obviously like Jackson and I are working full time on this as well as another developer named Jacob. And so we decided, okay, we're going to actually go to users and say, hey, we'd like to charge. And the only people that stayed were in behavioral health. So in some ways, it's just, we got really lucky that we worked with some early psychiatrists in our journey, and they were gracious enough to support us when we were still developing the product. The other thing I'll just add as a misconception. So one of the misconceptions, which is, what we just talked about, just patient comfort with the technology. There's a second misconception, which is that people hear about our software and because everyone knows Dragon, they think, oh, it's speech to text software. I know that. I've tried it. I don't like it. And it's taken a lot of communication to help folks understand, no. You can do dictation with our software. We call it like Dragon on steroids because you don't have to, it's not speech to text exactly. You can monologue organically and you'll get a note, but it's taken a lot to help people understand, no, this is actually a full scribe. It's like a human scribe, but better in terms of accuracy. And it's priced at cheaper than Dragon. Like that is just really confusing to people who have known Dragon in the ecosystem for years and years.
It's interesting. You mentioned how the behavioral health specialists had been the ones who stayed for the most part. Is there anything else regarding how JotPsych works, operates that lends itself well to behavioral health specialists in terms of vocabulary or how it picks up on other topics that are communicated in a session?
Yeah, the biggest advantage of working with behavioral health as a specialty is that the narrative, like the patient's conception of their own story, is material to their medical care. And the majority of the note is actually constructed based on the conversation. That's really different than, I'll give you an example. We were working with an oncologist up in Boston for a little while, and he was using the software every day, and he was telling us how much he liked it. And then we started to ask him, like, hey, how much of the note do you actually get from the conversation? And he said to us, oh, like, I don't know, 3-4%, because most of the note that I write as an oncologist is a reflection on the forensic data I have from labs, tests, pathology reports, scans. And so, your technology is fine, but it's actually not writing most of my note. And we want to be in the business of writing most of the note because that's where we provide the most value. What we believe is that certain fields, behavioral health as one of them, palliative care, we actually think is another. We think that gynecology actually also might be another field where this is particularly important. We want to stay really focused on specialties where the actual conversation is really, really medically relevant.
If I can put this in like a bit of a nerdy, like informational theory kind of way, I'm the technical brain here. And when I get excited about this software, I think of it in terms of when you have a specialty where so much of the information that's medically relevant is actually happening in conversation, it grinds my gears to imagine all that information being transmitted in this conversation and existing in the room, and then having to then be later like rewritten down, just like reconstructed through thought. I think of our software sometimes as just this little box that sits in the room that just, it captures all of that information that's coming out in the conversation and just makes it so that you don't have to redundantly say it again. If you've already said something in the conversation and something comes out in that two-way with the patient or with the client, that then exists, it is captured and then is put into the medical note so that you don't have to have this kind of like crazy redundancy of information theory.
Yeah, if you want to think about the most inefficient way to do something, it's like instead of having a court reporter, how about just have them discuss it afterwards later on to talk about what just happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Charm Health. If you're in the market for a secure, stable, easy to use EHR system, this is the place for you. I've been using Charm for over 5 years, and I've found it to be the one EHR system that I've used where I'm spending more time thinking about my patients and less time thinking about charting. It just makes everything so easy. It has everything in one spot, and their pricing is extremely transparent, unlike many other EHR systems. Every feature that you want in an EHR, Charm has, from dot phrases to e-prescribing to document management, scheduling, and billing all in one. I've studied EHR usability and also did a podcast episode on EHRs, and I can safely say that Charm is among the top in clinician satisfaction. Not to mention, they are always releasing new features, and not just to stay abreast on the current market, but user-requested features as well. They are extremely open to feedback and improving, and I've gotten to know many of them at the Charmalot conference, which was a blast. I highly recommend Charm, and I think they have a phenomenal EHR system. Reach out to me or to someone on the sales team to schedule a demo, or visit charmhealth.com for more details. What about, so in terms of the oncology example, and I think some psychiatrists might be wondering, okay, well, what if I have an inference that I made according to the conversation, or I want to give my own opinion or assessment? How would I add that in and incorporate that into the JotPsych workflow?
There's 3 ways that I would say. So the first way is kind of the hacky way that we've seen different providers do it. So we worked with a pediatrician out in Kansas City, and he had this practice that we thought was really cool, where he would go into the room, have an interaction with the child and the parent, and then would walk out of the room and would just continue dictating into the recording. And what that did was it allowed the audio that we were synthesizing and studying to be both the full conversation as well as his kind of private reflections. So that's the first way. The second way is you can edit your note dynamically in our software. So typically there's only like 2 or 3 things, that we find people adding afterwards because they don't want to speak them out loud. And at a click of a button, you can make the change, click save, and now you've got a note that the spinal cord is what we generated, but the full note and the full flesh and body of that note are, partly contributed by you. And we're really upfront with people. Hey, our software does not eliminate charting for you. It reduces your time charting by 90 to 95%, but we're not promising that you never have to touch your chart. The third thing is a new feature that Jackson can talk more about, but over the next 6 months or so, we're probably going to be rolling out a tool that allows you during the visit to jot down like very small things and then click submit. And you submit that kind of those private thoughts that you might otherwise type on like a private notepad into the engine, which then will kind of weave that together with the content from the client visit or the patient visit. So we've got a few different ways you can do it, but we always say this to people, it can't read your mind. We have not created a mind reader yet. If we did, that's probably the business we'd be in.
It also sounds like there's a process in which the algorithm learns your preferences over time and improves. Is that right, based on what you were saying earlier, Jackson?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways that works. Some of it is actually just giving physicians and providers the ability to go in and kind of modify what they want, create their own template, set stuff up ahead of time. And, we find that a lot of people in this space, they like to manage things. We've seen people with dot phrase templates in Epic or something where you sometimes wonder if they would have had a career as a data scientist and been more happy because they've created this like massive infrastructure. And they're like, oh, I made this for my department and we shared it with this other department. And we know that those personalities exist who like to get in there and customize it. So we like to give people all the tools they need in order to go ahead and do that. But then what we also have is kind of a simple system where after a note is generated, on every single section of that note, there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down. And if you like the way that it came out and you're happy with it, you can give it a thumbs up. And then our software kind of incorporates that. If you don't like it, you give it a thumbs down. And then we know, okay, there's a problem here. And the next step after that, and this is the feature we're currently developing, is being able to, when you give that thumbs down, have a chat box come up and say, okay, what didn't you like about this? And then you can actually kind of have a two-way with our software there and say, this was pretty good, but it missed this one thing that I think is very important when I see, pediatric patients. And then it says, oh, okay, let me redo this. I'm going to regenerate the note. Okay, now here's the new version of it. Did I get this right? And then if you're happy with it, then it says, great, I'm going to remember that for next time. And now, you've improved your own personal scribe with some directive feedback that you're giving in a conversational way. You don't have to go in and like open a page with 30 buttons and checkboxes and switches and do all of that in order to get this very specific outcome. You can kind of just talk to it like you would an actual human scribe, give them some feedback, and then they're going to incorporate it.
I want to go back to your stories real quick. I think out of excitement for the technology, we jumped right in. But as a psychiatrist, I like to kind of understand where people are coming from. And I think there's a little bit to be learned here for any individuals who want to go into innovating in mental health in particular. When you're thinking about this idea, or just if you rewind just prior to that, because documenting really isn't the shiny, glamorous component to mental health or healthcare in general. How did you see that there was an opportunity here? Because I think if we rewind back prior to the release of ChatGPT, I think the concept of having a technology that sits in a doctor's room and is able to transcribe the note would just sound completely sci-fi to most people. But you took that idea and said, no, we're going to do this, and then ran with it, and now you're continuing to improve upon it. What attracted you to using AI in documenting versus diagnosing or treating or some other component of healthcare?
Part of it was that even though it's not a glamorous problem, it is a problem that everyone talks about in medicine. I kind of mentioned my mom and dad are in medicine. Jackson and I grew up in Cleveland, in the shadow of the Cleveland Clinic. All of our friends and family are in some way, by 1 degree or 2 degrees, connected to the Cleveland Clinic or University Hospitals or Metro Health. So I think because of our background, we actually just were aware. We thought of this as a shiny problem. And we also thought about it as a place where we could really make a difference, given that Jackson and I are not medical people. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense for us to go and try and compete in the diagnostic space, for example, because we didn't go to medical school, and that's kind of a different world. And there are also some really, really cool companies already working on that. So we felt like there was a need. When Jackson and I have been really good friends for a very long time, and we decided we wanted to embark on a project that employed AI for good, that, used artificial intelligence to make a positive impact on the world. We actually came up with this list, and this was one concept on the list. And for each concept, we did a bunch of research. We interviewed people. And when we started interviewing people about charting, we very easily were able to develop research partnerships. So the first 3 months of our time on this company, Jackson and I just lived in doctors' offices. I mean, we just traveled around the country, and anyone who would take us in, we would just huddle in their office and watch them create a note. And then we'd go back to our Airbnb at night and kind of stitch together another prototype. And that was a really golden, fun time. And the openness that medical offices had with us really sent us this message, which is, hey, you're onto something that people are going to want if you can do it. That was our North Star. Our North Star was we want to build something that people want.
I remember in the very beginning when we had this list of things we wanted to work on, we were trying out and just interviewing people on the phone, and Nate said, oh, we definitely need to do medical documentation. And my initial thought was, there is no way that anyone is going to let us come in and sit there and watch them interact with the patient and try to hack together our little toy thing here in order to make a medical note for them. I thought there was just no chance. I thought it was dead on arrival. And then Nate said, okay, but let's just get a couple people on the phone and talk to them. This problem was so big. I remember this is really when the gravity hit me. We were talking to someone that we'd never met before. We just somehow found them on LinkedIn or something. It was a physician, and we were talking about this problem, and they said, this is the bane of my existence. If you can come up with software, even if it's a long shot, that can help me with my documentation, you have full access to everything. You can come see any patient you want. You can come live in my house. You can come stay in my, office as long as you need. Like, you can come here and just help me please figure this out. And then I said, okay, wow, I guess this is what we're going to be working on for a while. And we're still here.
That was the aha moment for you.
Yeah, the first doctor that we worked with was a doctor up in Connecticut, and we had no product. And we were totally honest about this. We're like, we don't have a product. We just want to watch how you do documentation. And so we got this like little place next to his office, and every day we'd go in. And the first night we built like the very first, we stayed up till like 3 a.m, like building like the very first like prototype. It was all running in, I think it was running like in like the code processor. So there was no like UI to it. It was like we would take an audio file, we would copy it into like that black and green terminal that's in your computer. And then that audio file would get kind of processed in that terminal. Then we would extract the text, put it in a Google Doc, print out the Google Doc, and then go to the doctor with the printed out physical copy of the note that had no section titles or anything. It was just and so on the last night, we felt like we had something that was kind of good. And so we went over to his house. It was late. His family's all around. It's like a chaotic family home, with kids and dogs and all that. And he took out a red pen and he just like started marking it up. And he was so excited. You could see it in his eyes that he was excited about what he was editing, and he saw the potential in it. We had 100 moments like that. And every single one of those moments, I mean, first of all, we feel super grateful to the providers who have been open to working with us when they're not getting like a huge benefit out of it initially, they're really doing us a favor. But every one of those like encouraging moments has pushed us forward and kind of caused us to invest more of ourselves into this company.
I'm glad I asked that question because I think that's a really cool story and background that you gave about the company and how it got started, and something I think maybe a lot of new innovators can relate to, just being pretty scrappy and thankful and grateful for any opportunity that you get when you're first starting out. Where do you see things going now? I'm sure as innovators, you probably have a whole list of new ways that this can be improved upon. One way I'm thinking is there's a lot of inferences that are made in, for example, our mental status exam in terms of how the patient is doing according to their tone or the content, how quickly they're talking. Since this whole thing seems pretty preposterous that it actually exists, is that something that is just a pipe dream that won't happen for a few years? Or like, how close are we to getting to that really sci-fi type of outcome where it kind of has read your mind, as you mentioned earlier?
I'll let Jackson answer this, but I will say that tone is something that we need to incorporate into our model. And the reason is because of sarcasm and humor. We've gotten this comment on our software a few times now where someone will make like a really sarcastic comment. Our software doesn't read tone. That's just not what it's built to do yet. And so sometimes you get some absurd, something like patient is planning to go fly a kite. And it's like, no, that was an idiom that was used to like describe them like going out for the, but yeah, tone is definitely something we're gonna have to incorporate. The dream for me and for Jackson is to develop 5 years from now what is a completely keyless EMR, an electronic medical record that, has the absolute lowest kind of profile in a physician's or nurse practitioner's life. So everything that we do right now is super focused on creating the best note. But ultimately, like we keep that utopia like at the center of our hearts, like as we continue to develop over the next few years. But Jackson, some of the cooler sci-fi stuff that we're working on.
I want to say, to your question, there are a lot of companies out there that are working on this next level of AI sci-fi stuff that I would say kind of dips into the diagnostic realm. There's a lot of literature and a lot of exciting stuff going on, especially on just like differential diagnostics and like how AI can help support that. And that's something that we as a company, at least right now, are really kind of trying to stay clear-eyed about, us not going into that. We see our mission here really as we want to take this technology and make it so that it can help you as the physician, as the clinician, get all of the stuff done so that you can focus your own mind and your own training and your own background on doing the best caregiving and diagnosing possible. But we're not trying to right now get into the space of saying, oh, well, because the patient said this, this, and this, they probably have this. Or there might come a time, the first step that's going to be made in that direction is suggested diagnostics that are there just to help a physician or a clinician. You can imagine a note generating based on everything that was said in the conversation, and then a little side box somewhere saying, hey, just so you know, based on this conversation, you might want to look into this rare condition that maybe you're just isn't top of mind to you, but the data suggests that it could be possible. And it's not saying, oh, this is it, and we're putting it in the note as like, this is what we're diagnosing the patient with, but some kind of additional support that just sort of creatively prompts the provider to think about something that they might not otherwise have. And this is a conversation that I think is relevant in AI in general. When people talk about using ChatGPT for their work, this is something that comes up all the time where people are saying, but it's not factual, like it can't actually give like the real truth. And what people say is, yeah, but that's not its greatest use. The greatest use that a lot of people find is that it's a conversation partner to just kind of like help you expand your own thoughts or see things that you didn't see before or make connections that were there, but you just didn't quite get to it, surface that for you, but then puts the decision-making power still in your hand. We're really careful about trying to make sure that we don't take away any of that power or take away any of that ability for a provider to make those decisions. So over the near term, we're just going to be laser focused on nailing the documentation problem. And then from there, maybe even adding some things that just help someone manage their practice, manage the relationships with people, remind you, that patient that you saw a year ago, here's just like a couple things that you talked about relevant to your social interaction with them that can kind of just like help you go back into that encounter and remember some things. So we have some things like that are on the near term. But in terms of like the real sci-fi stuff, that's just not something that we're like focused on right now. But I am sure it is an exciting field. And we just as a society are going to see medicine in general change over the next couple of years as it gets layered in with more and more of this artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I'm really curious as to what the long-term ramifications are to you guys and other companies like yours saving clinicians on a national level millions and millions of hours. Like, what is going to happen? Are we going to get our lives back? Because I was reading in Becker's said something like 50% of physicians are burnt out, and maybe it's going to help reduce burnout. And we're just going to say, we got 2 hours now that we have free for our families, perhaps. Or is it going to be kind of like how expanding a highway doesn't actually improve traffic? More people just end up driving. Maybe the administrators are going to say, you got 2 hours. Well, you can do all these other tasks now. Look at that. I mean, it's a really interesting concept. And maybe you should have a counter on your website of like how many hours generally, which translates to dollars, probably have you saved across the entire country. It's pretty cool. I think you are in a position where it's different than us, where we help individuals on a one-to-one level. You make a change. And I've said this in other episodes, the improvement is amplified across all of your clients and all of those patients those clients are seeing. And you can have the opportunity to affect literally hundreds of thousands, depending on how large you are at the time, hundreds of thousands of people in the next day, depending on a new feature that you have rolled out.
Just to speak to the burnout issue and the capacity issue and where does the time go? We've been shocked at some of the forecasts about physician shortfall. I think that everyone knows about the shortage of nurses and nurse practitioners, but there's forecasts that even in the physician group, we're going to be 100,000, 130,000 short in like 10 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that burnout has kind of this compounding effect where on one hand, it kind of urges people out of the profession early. It also discourages people from getting into the profession. There's so many exciting things to do and exciting professions to pursue if you're technically minded, if you are science minded. And in the past, a very large portion of that population would go into medicine. And now that's less and less the case. And one thing that we hope is that we can change the narrative and the tone around how people speak about practicing, again, either as a nurse or as a nurse practitioner or as a physician or as a therapist. And, we'd love to see more people actually enter the behavioral health field in general, because I think we all know that like our country and our world needs more support and needs more research and needs more clinical care when it relates to mental health. So I guess the dream for us is that this is a capacity expanding tool, that this is a thing that actually allows our healthcare system to serve more people at a lower cost. And also, the mechanism of that is allowing folks like yourself to spend time with your family on weekends, to get home at a reasonable hour, to not feel like pain of burnout.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much for that insight. I'll give you both the last word if you'd like to give some closing thoughts.
Yeah, we would just like to tell anyone listening, if you're even remotely curious about our software, go and try it. You can go to our website right now. In 5 minutes from now, have everything set up and be rolling on your 1-week free trial. There's no credit card required to try it. If you're even someone who's, non-medical and you're just curious about how this works and you want to see it for yourself, fine by us. Sign up, set up an account, and give it a try. You can just go to JotPsych.com, Google JotPsych, and you'll be right there and you can get rolling right away.
I'll just add by saying, Bruce, thanks for having us on your show. It's been wonderful to work with you and to kind of hear your feedback on our software as we've been developing it. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that none of this would be possible without providers like you who are willing to generously engage with us and teach us how to build something that is really useful. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is awesome. A lot of fun. I think what you're working on is really important for the industry and for physicians and other practitioners on an individual level. And I appreciate you talking about all of these interesting factoids from your company and how the technology was developed to how it works and the impact it's had on all the clinicians who use it and their patients because they get to have a more enjoyable visit with their clinician. We will put the link to JotPsych in the show notes and any other materials and resources that we had mentioned throughout the episode, and we will catch you all in the next one. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Bruce.
That's it for this episode. I'd appreciate it if you please like and share this podcast with your colleagues. It'd be especially helpful for us. If you'd like, please leave us a rating on your favorite podcatcher. If you're a clinician, I developed a course on how to start a private practice. And for patients, I've also developed a course on acceptance and commitment therapy and cognitive behavioral-based therapy lessons for treating and helping anxiety. You can find all these on our website as well as the show notes and resources for each episode. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.